All right, so let's start. My name is Dan Hank. This Skull Session podcast, and today my guest is Nikki. Nikki, how do we pronounce your last name?
Gallegos.
Right. I didn't want to screw that up, so I was like, I'll let you do that.
It's the double L's in Spanish.
Right, right.
Gallegos.
Yeah. Well, I was even married to a lady from Colombia, and I still am not good with Spanish. So it's
Hey,
yeah.
that's why I
All right.
say Dr. G at work. It's much easier.
Yeah. So where do you work?
So I work in central Illinois in like a little community ER, about
Okay.
18 beds. Yeah, so it's not like massive by any means.
Okay. And so is that what you want to do for a living? Is that what you're doing to like that you enjoy doing to get you to the next level? I mean, what's your process?
Yeah, I mean, I always wanted to be a doctor, like growing up. I always liked the idea of the blood and the gore, which should have told me something there. But no, yeah, I do enjoy it. It's a lot of fun meeting people from different walks of life, and you can learn something from every single person you meet. Plus, you get to see some pretty cool shit sometimes. So, but yeah, I do enjoy it quite a bit.
I remember I worked before I was even like right now I own a tattoo parlor. Before I even owned that, I worked a ton of crappy jobs. And one I worked at a restaurant and there was a lady that used to be an EMT there. And some of the best stories she told me ended up in my novels later on. Like I remember there was a crowded train platform and some guy, it was so crowded he got pushed in front of the car and like so the train hit him and like it basically
Oh,
it twists his body around like a candy cane, so only his head was sticking out. So then like the emergency medical services got there, and they were telling him they're like, look, we can fly in your family if there's anybody to talk to, but basically you're dead. You're like, no, I'm fine. Just
yeah.
move the train. They're like, no, no, you're dead. Like your
No,
whole
like that would
body
be
is acting
bad.
like a
Bad
tourniquet.
news,
Yeah,
dude.
yeah, yeah. But I thought that was pretty dramatic. But there were a couple of stories like that. But all right, so let's not focus on me. Let's focus on you. So, what do you have going on? You want to give me a little itinerary of what's in your life right now?
Yeah. So my debut novel, The Broken Heart, will be coming out September 19th. So leading up to that, hanging out with cool podcasters like yourself, menacing Twitter, waiting for ARC reviews. Otherwise, I am working on a little project. I don't want to spoil too much, but I got a bit of an idea when I went to Stkercon about some Swifties, some Stoker Connies, some zombies. So I'm working on it'll probably end up being like a novelette, but I think it'll be pretty good.
So, was writing something that you always had in mind, or is that more recent?
I always really enjoyed it. I embarrassingly kept a journal like middle school, high school, and now when I read it, it's almost like a manifesto, and I'm like, Jesus Christ. But anyway, I always enjoyed it, but I did biology and chemistry in college. So the writing classes I did were like required, and to be honest, I kind of hated them because I hated how like subjective it was, and then oh, the chrysanthemum, what does that mean to you? What did the writer mean? Like I couldn't stand that shit. But yeah, I mean I always would like closet write, but I never really told anybody. But like COVID happened, right? And initially work got pretty dead because nobody wanted to come in. And then you actually started seeing shit hit the fan. And I mean, a lot of people, got pretty burnt out, as did I. So I had to turn to like an outlet to, creative energy, get things out there. And I finally was just like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to go for it and see what I can do with this. I've always harbored a secret dream, but like I felt imposter syndrome, I guess, maybe kind of saying it out loud.
they can help you evolve from like writing like notes in journals and little stories to go, I'm gonna make this a full novelization. I'm gonna like tell a tale. I'm gonna craft something bigger than like little bits and pieces.
Yeah. Well, and it didn't actually start out with like The Broken Heart. I have another novel, I guess, in the works, but I kind of abandoned that, where I had this idea of a doctor kind of extracting vigilante justice against like shitty people. You know, we run into a lot of that, unfortunately, in the ER. You see like abuse,
Shitty people or
domestic
doctors
violence.
extracting justice?
Not enough doctors extracting justice, unfortunately. But shitty people, yes. I mean, where do you see the dregs of society sometimes, you know? Whenever somebody gets hurt, where do they bring them? ER,
Right.
right?
Well,
And
I'm
yeah, I
sure
mean,
like the police and like the medical facility and so on, like all those like service industry jobs, I'm sure they counter like the worst of the worst. I mean,
right.
I think it is, it's kind of a like a no brainer why the people of the DMV are so mad. Because like, look at what they have to deal with all day.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's something sometimes. You see some pretty crazy stuff, and it's sometimes difficult because you have to be impartial, I guess. You know, you have to provide the care. You have to pretend that they didn't do something horrible and just do what you have to do. But sometimes it is difficult to push that aside, knowing things. You know what I mean?
Right. All right. So going back to your writing for a minute, I feel like everybody, because there are so many authors out right now, and there's like so much reference material available, and there's Kindle and there's audio, but like it's almost like a oversaturation of everything. So I feel like people,
Mm-hmm.
it really helps if you have an angle, not like a gimmicky angle, but like something that makes your stuff unique and different. What would you say? Would you say like it was the medical profession? What would you say was your angle?
Oh yeah, definitely. Um, I like the idea of medical horror too. You know, a lot of the things that we do to people that are procedures, you know, if you really think about them, they're pretty freaking brutal. You know, like, and seeing that every single day and doing it definitely helps with like writing, you know. I mean, how many people can say that they've literally, you know, stabbed somebody in the ribs and like pushed through their muscles and felt their bones and stuff, you know what I mean? So it
Right.
definitely helps.
Well, is there like is there a reference that you kind of think like that kind of captured what I want to bring to life, or like are there movies or are there books or stories out there that you're like that's kind of the vibe that I'm going towards?
One I can think of that I really admire would be like Malignant. You know, it was maybe a little bit campy and over the top, but I thought it was pretty top notch medical horror. And I have to say, you know, your Tales of the Crypt hat, my mom would totally let me watch that as a kid, you know. And I very vividly remember one episode. I can't recall exactly, you know, all of the players involved, but this he must have been a scientist or a doctor. He found his wife cheating on him with another man, and they were like, "Oh, I want your body," and he like took their heads and transplanted them onto each other's bodies, and I was like, "Oh, hell yeah!"
That's
It's
pretty
like a
awesome.
6-year-old or whatever, you know what I mean?
Do you remember the episode where it's like it's like a guy, a fitness instructor, is cheating, is like convincing a guy's wife to cheat, and he buries him up to the neck in sand, and like the waves slowly come in and kill them, and they come back as like
Yeah.
zombies. Yeah.
I need to revisit that show and do a whole rewatch. It is so good.
Yeah, I think the first movie is better than the second by far, but there definitely are a couple because there's stories. So I think there are a couple of really strong stories in that one. Like especially, I don't know if you saw the second one. Did you see it?
Not I can't recall. No.
There's one where they're like on a raft in like the middle of a pond. There's this like flesh eating, like weird, like oil slick that's, I don't know. I don't want to ruin it. There are some stuff we're seeing that. There's a couple of stuff you're like, yeah, but there's nothing that you're like, why did that bother? Like
Yeah.
Pumpkin 3 or something, like guy prancing
Yeah.
around in a rubber suit. But so going back to your writing, people pick different ways of telling stories, like different perspectives. Like they tend to go with like first person or third person, occasionally second person, but they rarely do that. And some people like to do a little bit of backstory, more like the Richard Matheson. You write I
Hmm.
Am Legend, Hell House, and to me, kind of the classic horror, like the Tales from the Crypt, whatever, is that Richard Matheson style, where you kind of like build something up and then something shocking happens. Where it seems
Hmm.
like a little bit more often these days, people like to throw shocking stuff in your face right away. And I feel like there's less there, there's less meat to the story when people do that. I mean, some people can pull it off, but it is like I think it's a little bit better if you like throw it and then you wind back and then you come back to it again.
Hmm.
Um, what's your approach?
So I agree with you. I like to do a bit of a build up as well. I think it almost builds up a little bit more atmosphere at times to do it
Right.
that way instead of being like, here's a bunch of blood, here's a bunch of guts, here's the main part of the story. Now we're gonna go back here. But I I find myself enjoying doing first person because a lot of the times, like with third person, I'll find myself like attributing things to like characters that aren't the main focus of the scene. Just because I don't know if I think it's because I'm a little witty or funny or something, but the broken heart I definitely wrote first person, but initially it was third person, and it wasn't working, so I had to go back through the entire thing and switch everything. But it was 100% needed for sure.
I
And
feel
I actually initially started it more like blah in your face and arrange things, and I think it flows much better now.
Yeah, I feel that reminds me because I just did one of the stories I did for the new anthology I have out. Like I initially started in first person. Like first person is kind of my go-to. Like I'm a big fan
Yeah.
of H.P. Lovecraft, and more so like the way he tells the story than necessarily like his dialogue and his characters. Because I think his ideas are great. I think his dialogue is very much from the 30s. It's a little bit
Oh yeah.
purplish, a little bit, over the top. But so I started out in first person, and I like the immediacy of first person. But I feel like first person, you can run into danger there because it's kind of like the shaky cam of like writing, like the Blair
Yeah.
Witch Project or the Cloverfield, So it's like if you pull it off, it's great. If you can miss the mark, then you really miss the mark, you know
Yeah, that's true.
but I wrote a story and like there's definitely a medical procedure in there. I mean, spoiler alert is all like, like aliens experimenting on people and whatever. But still, I felt that I better capture the horror of it by putting it in first person and the person being subjected to it and you're seeing through his eyes what is being subjected to as opposed to just kind of describing what's going on.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Because, if you're feeling it, you're in it. I feel like that's a lot more horrible than kind of the third person, more detached version.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah, I know that like
I'm
good.
I'm just curious what your medical procedure is. If there's aliens, is there, rectal probing, South Park style,
No,
Cartman?
no, it's more like I've kind of like maintained this theme. Like originally I wanted to be a comic book artist and a comic book writer. And one thing I like about that is they maintain the continuity. So like, even if something is like a different title like 10 years later, it still might reference back to something earlier. So they like
Hmm.
everything still lives in the same universe. So, what I'm saying with that point is, so what I tend to always kind of maintain the same theme with everything I do, which
Mm-hmm.
is that like you have these like horrible kind of like almost Lovecraftian creatures from like another dimension, that
Mm-hmm.
like you have higher ups in like I wouldn't even say the US government, I'd say like the world government, because they kind of feel like oligarchs rule everything. So they've
Yeah.
kind of combined with these creatures, and they run experiments on people. And in this story, like there's somebody that they bred, this like a hybrid, but thinks it's human, and like it starts fucking up. And so they bring it in, they strap it. So the guy wakes up strapped to a gurney with like this needle descending into his face, you know,
Oh
and
yeah.
I figured that's way more impactful if you're like the guy, you're like, what the fuck? As opposed to like,
Yeah.
yeah, well, this guy's on the gurney and then this happens.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I'm picturing like the that torture robot off of Star Wars that's always
Right.
going. Ugh. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking a little bit, have you seen the movie Fire in the Sky?
I haven't.
It's actually really good. It's whenever Hollywood says based on a true story, it's always loosely based on a true story. But
Yeah.
they get a lot of stuff, whether it's right or wrong, they get a lot of stuff. Um, it impacts you. Like you really like the way they pulled the scene off. There's some kind of embellishment. Like so, it's Travis Waltman is the guy that tells the story. He was like supposedly abducted by aliens while he was like on like he was with some like tree cutters in the woods, and like they had this alien encounter and stuff. It's a really good story, but it's and he wrote a book about it, and that book was eventually turned into a movie. And he says, well, some of the stuff in the movie is a little bit like over the top and not quite what happened, but it's a good story. But so if you
Yeah.
this is getting long, so I'll cut to the point. The point is, I'm saying there are some scenes in it where you're like, yeah, I want to capture that. Like there's one where he's experimented on by aliens. I was like, that's a great idea.
It sounds good. I'll have to add that to my rotation for sure. I have so many movies to add on my, to watch list.
Right. Well, especially I don't like horror when it's like straightforward, like just splatter. I like it when like there's a story that, especially like cosmic horror, like Event
Mm-hmm.
Horizon. I don't know if you've seen Event Horizon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Loved
So,
Event Horizon.
so like Event Horizon or Fire in the Sky or Alien, like they all have like curious elements are thrown in there. But
Mm-hmm.
we should talk movies all day. So getting back to your story. So what is kind of like what's kind of the impetus and the storyline behind it?
So The Broken Heart follows Casey Phillips, who wanted, the American dream, husband, kids, kind of fell into that script, and things don't go quite as she planned. Her husband's an alcoholic, kind of abusive douche. Her son's kind of a Damien, the good son kind of guy. And she ends up getting pregnant and ends up suffering from heart failure secondary to the pregnancy, and ends up getting a heart transplant from a serial killer. And as you can imagine, shit hits the fan because she gets set up with everybody's horseshit, essentially. Bit splattery for sure.
It seems like a couple of people they've used like similar elements. Like, have you seen the movie? I think it's called The Eye, where somebody
Yeah,
gets like eye transplants from a killer.
corneal transplant or something like that. Yeah, I
Yeah,
came up with the idea. You want to know? Actually, the best place where all ideas come up, the bathroom at work. So I'm sitting there, and they put up flyers, chili day in the cafeteria Thursday, or whatever, and they had one for like gift of hope, so the organ transplant program. And I was just like, what if you got transplant from a serial killer, and then it just fucked you up? and
Right.
I couldn't get it out of my head. I had to get it out there. But yeah, there are a couple of stories like that. I would agree
Well,
with that.
I think it's kind of curious. It's like because there's so much we don't know. You know, it's like you would think that like the kind of mentality of the serial killer would be in their brain, so it'd have to be like a brain transplant. But then you find that like the way that things function really affect your personality. Like people get hit by
Hmm.
cars and they have like a totally different personality, or they like a steel worker will have like like a workplace accident and a steel rod will be driven through his head. All of a sudden he has a different personality. So,
Right.
little things it's like the butterfly effect, so it's possible,
Hmm.
yeah, anything that you have, because it might change maybe it change the way your blood functions. I don't know. I mean, you're
Hmm.
right. There's so much we don't know.
Well, and I can't remember what culture it is, but some ancient culture believes that your soul actually resides in your heart, which
Right.
is kind of what got me thinking about that. Um, but yeah, you're totally right. What is it? The Phineas Gage thing where he got the railroad spike through his head and yeah, totally changed his personality.
Well, that's
Um,
it with a number of people to be shot with like a 22, and like for some
mhm.
reason, like the bullet didn't hit a vital part, so they still live, but it does change the personality.
Yeah. Well, the same thing with like football players that or boxers that they get repeat head injuries and they get that
Yeah, trauma, yeah.
yeah, that chronic traumatic encephalopathy or whatever, where then they, what is it, Chris Benoit or whatever, didn't they think that that's what happened to him, and then he you know
Well, there
axed
are a
his
bunch.
family.
Like, there's kind of like I don't even think it's really so much a joke, it's just a commentary. Is it like I think 90% of all athletes go broke. Like they might have made millions of dollars, but their their logic and reasoning has been screwed up because they constantly get so much brain damage that they don't make good decisions with their finances after they retire. So they might have like $300 million, but by the time they die, they have like 20 grand in the bank.
Yeah, and I'm sure they probably get taken advantage of to some degree by other people,
And
but yeah.
I'm sure that's easier too when you have brain damage because
Oh yeah.
you're just not thinking clearly. Like they even think like I don't know if you heard of like the MMA guy War Machine. He was dating Chrissy Mack,
Mm-hmm.
and
Was that, yeah.
he
Ugh,
went
that was
crazy
bad.
and just like bludgeoned her face. He's in jail right now for abuse, but it's like that was probably because he was like so beat up in the cage that he just couldn't control his emotions. I'm not making excuses for him. I'm just saying that might have been a cause.
I definitely think it contributes for
Yeah.
sure.
Have you seen
Absolutely.
that with your patients? Like you have some patients that like have dramatic things that make them different.
Oh yeah. I'm most often it's drugs, to be honest, but yeah, like we'll see people that you work in the same place, you see certain people over and over, and yeah, you'll see people get into accidents and it'll dramatically change their personality, or sometimes it'll be the thing that gets them on like the straight path, you know what I mean, too. But yeah, you totally see it, but it's definitely a lot of drugs there for sure.
Yeah, well, probably the chemistry because like basically the chemistry of your body really affects the way you act, whether you get more exercise, whether you eat better, you
Hmm.
know. So yeah, like, if you take drugs, that's definitely affecting the whatever the drugs are, they're affecting the chemistry on different levels. Like I know that some people are like really anti any medication whatsoever. And I've always heard that there's like a big push from big pharma to have doctors always prescribe stuff. Have you felt that at all at your job?
Not so much of that. I sometimes wish, people always accuse us of, oh, every time you diagnose COVID, you get money, or if you prescribe this, you get money. I was like, I freaking wish we got some money if we did all that shit. But no, I think it probably used to be worse whenever drug companies would, they take doctors, send them to Bermuda with their entire family, give them a couple free pins. Yeah, prescribe this. But no, but a lot of meds that we do prescribe, like they're ungodly expensive, and that's the only choice that a lot of people have. And when it comes to, I'm going to either take this medicine that takes up half of my monthly income, or I'm going to provide for my basic human needs, what are they going to pick,
Right. Well, I actually feel, I mean, this is a diversion, so we'll get off this and not, because we're not talking about your book, but I feel like the diversion is that, a lot of people, rather than like get healthy, they want to take a medicine to cover up something. And I think there's way less focus on what, you can do. Like I'm not saying this with you specifically, but I'm saying with a lot of like medical professionals, they're like, oh, well, take this pill. Oh, we'll do it. They don't go, hey, why don't you run some more? Why don't you stop eating so much sugar?
Right. I think some of it's the American way too. You want a quick fix. You want a pill. It's going to fix everything.
Yeah, well, I remember when COVID hit and they said 38% of Americans are obese. Not overweight, obese. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to look like did you see the movie WALL-E, where everybody's like fat and they're in like a hover cars?
Oh, yeah. They all are on like hover
I'm like, we're headed towards that right now. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of, honestly, probably 90% of the stuff that we see is, I think, a result of shitty mental health services. Why do most people drink? Why do most people do drugs, overeat, smoking, cigarettes, even, you could say, because they're self-medicating.
Right.
But I could go on a diatribe about that. So
about people self-medicating.
Just how shitty our mental health and stuff. It's not a priority in the United States. You're supposed to just be tough and resilient and not talk about things. Not great.
Well, I think there's a last thing I'll say in this because we don't want to spend the entire time talking about mental health. But I remember there's a guy I worked with, and he was kind of bipolar, which is probably pretty common, like more common than people think. But if he didn't go, like he would do mountain biking. So if he went mountain biking in the morning, he was a pleasure to be with all day. If he didn't go mountain biking, he was a different person. And I know I'd go mountain biking with him, and like I guess that little like working everything out, you're breathing the air, you can live endorphins, you like that would just level him out for the entire day. And I think that kind of like broadly that could apply to a lot of people if they just did some stuff. You'd be surprised at how much. It's not like, oh well, it just makes you look better or makes you whatever. It actually improves the way that you handle everything.
Absolutely, totally agree.
All right, so going back to your book, what was kind of like the slowness of COVID, kind of the genesis of like I should get off my ass and work on this?
Yeah, it was. I did a lot of night shifts too, and not to say that it can't be an absolute disaster on night shifts, because it can, but it does typically tend to be a bit slower. So, occasionally, because it was so slow during COVID, we wouldn't have a patient check in for hours. And I was like, well, what else am I going to do? Read, but I started dabbling with the writing, and that helped. And then whenever everything got way shittier, it definitely helped, because it gave me something to look forward to, I guess, outside of work.
Probably also, maybe. Once you started a project, like now you're involved. Now this thing is real.
Yeah. I tend to be a person too that I want to like finish it. I don't want to be somebody that stops something or abandons it.
Right.
But yeah, it definitely helps.
The people who actually make it somewhere finish their projects. Like I know so many people that start something they get a little discouraged. They get a little like. I feel like you just got to go for it. If it does succeed, it does succeed. But at least you tried.
Exactly. I would rather know instead of wonder what if.
Right. So you said, did you go to Stkercon? You went to Stkercon this year?
I did. It was awesome. First
Okay.
Stkercon.
Okay. And you did some of the panels and seminars?
Yeah, I took part in a panel. Was make no mistakes about it, avoiding medical mistakes in your writing.
Yeah, no, that's
And I
good.
got to
Yeah.
be with Bridget Nelson,
Yeah.
former OR nurse and stuff. That was the only panel I was on, but I did attend several. It was awesome. It was much better than medical conferences I've been to. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, Bridgerton, that new anthology I just released. It's like 14 authors and 16 stories, and Bridget has a story there.
Oh,
But
nice.
yeah, Bridget's cool.
Yeah, she's awesome.
So when you did the panel, were you talking to any publishers? Were you talking to anybody like any maybe there were authors that you wanted to ask advice from or that you looked up to? You know, aside from the
Yeah,
panel, was there something that really grabbed you about SoCon?
just man, how supportive everybody is. People, they don't like in medical school, we have people called gunners that they will do anything that they can do to get on top. I'm like, they'll go to the library and hide books, or they'll buy all the books at the bookstore, or things like that.
So they're
Oh
willing to
yeah,
backstab you to further the career.
yeah, exactly. They want to look good, so they're gonna put other people down in a way to make
What are they called?
themselves
They're
look
called
good.
gunners.
Gunners, yeah. And yeah, and I have experienced that just everybody in the horror community, especially the writing community, they're so supportive, and that it's kind of something to realize, somebody else's success isn't necessarily threatening your success. We
Right.
got to lift each other up. So that was one of the things I was most, I guess, surprised by, because not to say that medical people are necessarily like that, but you kind of it's almost like a dick measuring contest at some of these medical conferences, like I have this many publications. So it was
No,
very
well, I
inviting.
know that happens, and it happens less with the authors. It seems like it happens
Yeah.
like I've attended a lot of artist conventions, and artists are very much like that. They're very competitive, and some people can be like even on this podcast. I remember I interviewed one artist, and when I started talking, if I wasn't talking about him, I could tell he was getting pissed off. It's
Really?
yeah, it was like I just tried to have conversations. Like the whole thing about this podcast is I try to have conversations, and I feel that it's more natural and you get more out of people. So I was just trying to have a conversation. It was like, oh, but you're not focusing on how great I am. It's like, okay,
You're
man.
like, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. But yeah, gunners. Now you learned something there. They're total douchebags.
All right. So, what are your plans in the future? Are your plans to expand this into a series, write some more books with different stories? Like, are you trying to maintain a continuity, like comic books do? What do you have in mind?
I do like the idea of producing a sequel to The Broken Heart, which would follow Casey, extracting justice on shitty people. But right now, I am. I have a first draft that's not very good, but I'm going through it now, and it's a story about a neurologist that invents migraine chips, because a lot of people, they'll do anything to stop suffering from migraines. They'll literally eat a turd to stop having migraines. They'll try all these like meds. So she makes these chips, but then she realizes that she can control people with them, and she's not altogether she's a bit nefarious. So
I think you might have like a really unique angle there with the whole kind of like a medical angle, because I feel like a lot of people don't do research. like maybe it says I'm a little bit OCD, but I'm like anything I write about, I want to do a deep dive into before I write about it because I really don't want to get called out. Like I
Yeah.
did a story about like there's like this alien creature of the Loch Ness, but I'm thinking of like the Loch Ness monster. So I actually went on vacation to Edinburgh and I took the bus tour up to the Loch Ness. And like you take like a tour boat across. Loch is their word for lake. So I took a tour, boat across the loch, so I could see what it felt like. You see, it's in the Highlands. Now I know that because I went there. So
Yeah.
I feel like delving into it and having like those those exquisite details really help bring it to life. And I feel like
Oh,
you might
yeah.
have that with like the medical details that a lot of people, even if they wanted to write the story, if they're not in the profession at all, they wouldn't even know to bring that stuff up.
Yeah. It's definitely helpful. I've not that I want to call anybody out, but there's a what is it called? Nosferatu, the Joe Hill story.
Mm.
In the beginning, it's he's meaning I think an EEG, which is like the little things that they put on your head to
Right,
monitor for like seizures and brainwaves. And he says EKG instead, which is the one that checks
right,
your
right,
heart. And it just surprises me because it's a great book, but how
right,
did it get through so many so much editing and nobody caught that? And
right.
it's a very like obvious thing. um and I think I mean it's unique in emergency medicine because you have to know a little bit about everything. You have to know a little bit about every specialty. The first, the emergency stuff, and then you kind of pass it off. So I'm kind of uniquely positioned to understand, I think, a little bit about everything. Whereas a lot of specialties, like a nephrologist, they know about the kidneys. That's it.
Well, probably you'd have a medical professional proofreading his book. That's probably where that happened. I know that like what really got me like kind of lit a fire under my ass to get my first book out was a guy wrote a book like it was a zombie apocalypse book, but one of the main characters was a tattoo artist. And at the time I was like in all the magazines and everything. So he wanted to get a hold of me to see like, how realistic his perspective of tattoo artist was, and he sent it over to me. Like he sent me, I don't remember if it was like an ebook file, but I remember I read it and I was like, all right, this is a horrible portrayal of a tattoo artist. Like there's a bunch of stuff here that anybody who tattoos would go, no, that would never happen. But he listened to me and he changed it. And I was like, and then it evolved to like, oh, well, what's your publishing company? Yeah, I'm working on something, you know,
Yeah.
but yeah, if you're delving into something, you definitely need to do the research. But I feel
Oh
like
yeah.
you have that angle with the medical stuff. I like your. You said that it's a poor draft right now, but I like the work that you're working on. What's it called again?
The migraine one.
Yes.
I have a working title. It's called Dr. Absence Miracle Migraine Chips, but I might shorten that at some point.
Right. What do you think of like the Elon Musk putting like the chip in your brain? Have you heard about that?
I've heard things about it. There's part of me in a way like, okay, we get these people, these patients that are like a John Doe, absolutely nothing about them. They come in, you don't know what they're allergic to, what they have, things like that. And I've often thought of like,
Well, I'm sure
if we
people lie
microchip our
too.
pets. Oh yeah. So we microchip pets. How awesome would it be if you were able to just like scan something and you're like, oh, you're allergic to penicillin. You have this. These are the meds you take. Like it would make our lives infinitely easier. But I feel like you're
But then you
just
also
offering
think people
control.
can control you. It could be like this could be the beginning of like Skynet or whatever, the Matrix.
Exactly. Or yeah, any Black Mirror episode where they're doing that kind of shit. But Well, and people even do that now. Like they can hack pacemakers or defibrillators and
Oh,
things because
really?
a lot of times, oh yeah, you can. So when somebody comes in with a defibrillator, so it's it shocks you if you're in a bad heart rhythm, and they'll come in and we can actually interrogate them like wirelessly to see why did it shock, what was going on, things like that, and people can hack into stuff like that. And then, I mean, in theory, you could shut something off and bam,
Wow. So what you're basically saying is like the movie Repo Man is not so far removed from the truth.
Not necessarily. Yeah. You're not supposed, well, they're making stuff differently now, but there's a lot of things that, you're supposed to tell people at the airport, oh, I have a pacemaker, because you're not supposed to go through certain things and they'll take you and frisk you elsewhere. But yeah, it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility.
I feel like a lot of people at like the airport, they're doing all the scanning stuff. They're not really paying that much attention. like, like,
No,
like you know how many terrorists they've caught ever since we've had like the NSA?
I probably not very many. How many is it?
Zero.
I was right.
But all right, so I want to keep you here too long, and I'm trying to shorten up the episodes a little bit. But do you have something else that you really want to get out? And you got to tell me how people can contact you and find your book.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, I would love if everybody would pick up a copy of The Broken Heart, which, as I mentioned, comes out September 19th. You could pre-order it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, but you can find me on Twitter at Dr. Spooky _ER.
Dr. Spooky. I feel
Dr.
like you should
Spooky.
be like on House of a Thousand Corpses or something, but good. Sorry.
I would ideally love that. Yeah, that would be great. Maybe in a couple of years, whenever I lose my mind. But and then I do have a website. So NJGallegos.com, Gallegos. And you can find links to my blog, links to buy my other stories. And I would advise anybody, if they wanted to pick up anything that's grisly, I have a splatterpunk story in Hellbound Books, anthology of splatterpunk, that follows a doctor that does pretty awful shit to rapists. But I mean, you're kind of rooting for her because fuck them, right?
That's kind of the premise, but it's also a werewolf story is in Bridget's contribution to my anthology. Like, and she works at a doctor's office. So she's like a medical professional, but she's really a werewolf, and she gets raped, and yeah. I no spoiler alerts, but it didn't go well for that guy.
Things did not go well. I'll be
Yeah.
picking that definitely up. But
Okay,
yeah,
awesome.
so
Well, it was awesome to have you on the show. Do you have anything else that you want to add?
spay and neuter your pets, buy The Broken Heart, leave a review, and be
Reviews
kind to
help.
each other.
Reviews, people don't even realize reviews really help.
Oh, they do. Ideally a 5-star. If you're gonna leave a 1-star, how about you don't? But that's whatever. Are you really an artist if you don't have a 1-star review somewhere?
It's true. There's so many Karens out there, like people that just hate to hate,
Exactly.
But
exactly. So you gotta just say fuck it.
Well, and more importantly, don't be discouraged. Just keep rolling through, because not everyone's gonna like your stuff. And to be honest, I don't want everyone to like my stuff. I think you're doing something right if you have some haters.
Exactly.
But
totally
all right,
agree.
Nikki, so thank you very much for being on here, and I appreciate the interview. And everybody, check out your book. Give a shout out to your book again.
The Broken Heart, out September 19th. Medical horror, slashers. Go for it.
Okay, awesome. All right, everyone, check that out. Check Nikki out, and we're looking forward to some good stuff in the future from you.
Thanks for having me on here, Dan. Appreciate it.